A lot of people don't realize that I'm an author and I wrote this book called The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. And I've talked about it a lot. I've talked about not necessarily the book, but saving marriages. And I've heard from some of my viewers, thank you guys, over in countries afar, that you cannot get the book without paying lots of extra fees for shipping. And I don't exactly know how that works. But I've also planned to do some videos about the different chapters in here. When it occurred to me, I think I'll just read out of the book. That way I can let you hear what is in the book for those of you that can't afford to get it, or would prefer just to see a video of it rather than having to read it. And then I'll add my own commentary afterwards. But also know that this book is sold in hard copy, and as well as Kindle, audiobook, and now you're going to get the video version. I am in the process of writing my follow-up book, and I covet your prayers for it. But today, well, instead of me telling you why I wrote the book, let me read the first chapter and see what your thoughts are. It's the preface of the book, The Super Couple, A Formula for Extreme Happiness in Marriage. And these are my words. Ever since I was a young teen, lightly right after hormones began to kick in, I have found myself interested in the current subject matter. Why some couples seem to remain extremely happily married, while others don't. I'm certain it wasn't to the degree that it is now, a degree I would label as a passion or even an obsession, but clearly in a meaningful way that has stood out in my mind. It was more than 3 decades later that the label super couples was given to these special couples. Little did I know that my own marriage would later fuel this obsession, because mine was anything but super. As a teen, I had labeled these couples as cute, the kind. I only need to give 1 or 2 sentences of description, and you two will say, "Oh, I know a couple just like the ones you're talking about. They're so in love. They'd be perfect for your study." I know this because nearly every time I articulate my definition of a super couple, this is the response that I receive. Now, my description may not sound too academic or formal, especially for one holding a doctorate in marriage communication, but that's deliberate. We don't need heady theoretical descriptions. We need something we understand and something that works, something that we can apply to our everyday lives and marriages in a meaningful and passionate way. This has seemingly been my mantra throughout my life without even my realizing it until recent years. That is, what's the point of knowing this intellectually stimulating stuff if you can't give me an example, and better yet, give me some specific instructions on how I should apply it or what I should do differently? My passion for your extremely happy marriage runs deep because it was born out of my own passion for my own marriage, the extremely happy marriage that I too yearned for but did not yet have. My marriage began in 1983, like most other marriages. We were passionately in love. Me, "Oh, I love you." Him, "No, I love you more." Me, "Oh, I can't live without you." Him, "I never want to spend a day apart from you." Both, "I can't wait till I get to wake up next to you every single day for the rest of my life." You get the picture. I remember the days well when my young Navy boyfriend was so many states away from me, and all I thought about nearly every minute of every day was being with him again. Every thought in my head and every cell in my body were constantly focused on this handsome young suitor, and the next time I could hear his voice, see his face, or best of all, be in his arms again. It was a joyful anguish that every young couple, every young lover has likely endured. I recall begging my mother to let me have my own phone line in my room so that I didn't have to share a line with any of my siblings once my lover did call. And when he did call, we would sit on the phone for hours, literally hours, sometimes just breathing while no words were spoken. Of course, you youngins who have cell phones don't even have a clue what I'm talking about. That's not in the book, but it should be. So that we'd run out of words. It was as if we were somehow closer to each other through that phone line than if we hung up. We took in all we could get of each other. I remember the first month, my phone bill was $337. Me, just my phone line in my bedroom. Remember, this was 1983, and that was a lot of money. Do the math. Go check and see what it would be today. My mother hit the roof. You could have bought a washing machine with that money. The next month, she yelled, and that was the dryer. Okay, this pattern continued for about 2.5 months, but soon thereafter, the pain of separation would end as I happily married my lover on August 3rd, 1983. Oh, how I loved that man. And I'm certain that he loved me. As I look back nearly 3 decades, I can remember no other time in my life that I was as blissfully happy as I was on those few short months that my young suitor courted me. Okay, this book is not about me. Well, it's not all about me. It is about you. It's about you and your marriage and the possibility of you two becoming a super couple. However, to tell you how to do so, how to be so, I must use my own marriage as an example of what not to do. In August of 1987, 2 daughters and 4 anniversaries later, I left my husband. I left him because I hated him and no longer felt joy at being in the same room with him, but rather felt only deep pain, deep and miserable pain. Allow me not yet to divulge the causes of that deep pain here, as they will be chronicled throughout the following chapters. Suffice it to say that divorce seemed the only option. Well, actually, it was a second option. Amidst my hate, I shamefully prayed for him to die. Everyone pities a widow, you know, but a divorcee, not so much. Know that I'm not proud of these words today, but who would I be if I weren't totally honest? We were separated for 4 years and reconciled in 1991, but we were still unhappy. Well, I was, but I'll explain more of that later. Some years later, and already into my formal education in the field of marriage, I was conversing with a male colleague of my husband, a very intelligent and rather high-ranking and educated military officer. Somehow the conversation turned to marital infidelity, and I stated that 50% of all marriages that endure infidelity go on to survive and often thrive. To which this man replied, "That's a bunch of crap. I don't know a single marriage that survived infidelity." I remember that day nearly 2 decades ago, as if it were just yesterday. I remember it clearly because his statement silenced me, a grand feat in and of itself, but not because of what you may think. I was silent because I wanted to exclaim, "Well, mine has," but I did not. I remained silent. My husband is an extremely private man who I knew would be devastated if hurtful marital laundry were to be exposed publicly. Kind of ironic to be sharing it instead with thousands of readers and now viewers decades later through a book detailing not only this marital trial, but nearly every private aspect of our marriage as well. Sorry, Dan, for better or for worse, right? Anyway, okay. I've often thought of that conversation over the years. As it replayed in my mind's eye, I'd begun to conclude, well, how would he have known? Who's talking? Who'd tell the truth? Who wants to be the first to broadcast his or her failures, especially one of this magnitude? And then I understood why my friend had not known. Someone needed to be transparent, and I'm guessing you figured out that I was that person. Many years, a PhD, numerous seminars, and marriage clients later, I can still look around within my own private circles of clients, colleagues, friends, family members, and I know which of these couples have had to endure infidelity. Well, most others around them are just as oblivious as my officer friend was decades earlier. I know who they are because they shared with me the pain as they were experiencing it, whether they were the betrayer or the betrayed. And to be honest, of those that have shared their stories of infidelity and marital struggles with me, most are still married today, and happily too. Going through my mental Rolodex, that's another word you young'uns don't know, I've calculated more than 75 to 90% But while this book is written in part for you and those who have struggled at understanding what it takes just to make a marriage work, let alone be happy or very happy, it's written about those married couples that are not only happy, but extremely happy. Extremely happy. My doctoral dissertation was on humor in marriage. For 5 years, I was devoted to and entrenched in researching and writing about how humor is used in the marital relationship. It was a great study, and not only did I learn a lot from it, I had a lot of fun writing it. It was a quantitative study, which meant gathering information from a large quantity of couples in the form of a survey to see what patterns emerged and what new knowledge I could garner. As such, nearly 80 questions on the survey pertain specifically to how humor was used in their marriages. How often do you and your spouse laugh together? Does my spouse appreciate my sense of humor? Do I ever use humor in a manner that hurts my spouse? But one question on the survey did not pertain to the use of humor in the marital relationship at all, but rather simply the quality of the relationship. It asked for each spouse to rate the general happiness of his or her own marriage on a scale from extremely unhappy, very unhappy, and unhappy to the flip side, which was happy, very happy, extremely happy, and perfect. More than 600 respondents answered this question, and the results amazed me. 7% checked perfect, which I figured were still newlyweds having sex every day, so I disregarded them. I also disregarded the accuracy of their responses. But however, a large number of people, a huge 35%, checked extremely happy. And I must admit, that amazed me more. Extremely happy? What does that mean? I was still hoping to get to happy, and yet this considerable sized group of spouses rated their marriages as extremely happy. I mean, wow. Was this an anomaly, or was there something bigger going on here of which I was not aware? After all, hasn't it been professed for the past several decades that 50% of all marriages failed or were going to fail? I finished my dissertation later that year, but this question and these responses haunted me. Extremely happy. They never left my mind. And like that young girl enthralled with those cute couples, so many decades earlier, I couldn't let go of what this meant for me, what this might mean for others, for my concept of marriage, for my concept of those lucky few who were so blessed to have found their so-called soulmates. And of course, then, for the rest of us who considered ourselves much less lucky in love. Gosh, I wish I were extremely happy in my marriage. I guess I'm just stuck with this less than perfect man and this painful less than perfect marriage. Oh, well, I should have picked the right guy. I wish I'd have picked my 1 in a million rather than my 1 in 100. But I didn't. So deal with it. Life went on, and on October 25th of that same year, my cousin lost her husband of 20 years to cancer. He was only 44. I was fortunate enough to be able to travel north to spend a week with her and talk and listen and to hopefully, in some small way, help her deal with her grief. We'd talk for hours. Though she was my first cousin and I knew her well, I'd only met her husband twice as they lived 500 miles away from us. I first met Frank on their wedding day and again a decade later during a vacation. I hadn't seen him again apart from a few of his posts on Facebook. But that was it for our relationship. While talking of their life, her marriage, her husband, and her loss, I began to pick up on some of the things my cousin was saying. I began to gain a deeper sense of what her marriage was like through the stories she shared and the way in which she shared them. Finally, I interrupted. Marianne, were you and Frank one of those? She interrupts, super couple. Yeah. Oh, yes. Frank and I, it seemed, never left high school. We would go out of our way to see who could be nicer to the other. Who could beat the other in our friendly but unspoken competition to be the best spouse to the other? I remember once he was having a particularly rotten day. I could tell by the way he sounded on the phone that afternoon. You can always tell. So I decided I would do my best to try and help him feel better about his day's stressors. I went to the store and got everything I needed to prepare his favorite meal. Now, I didn't especially like cooking, but I knew what Frank liked. Just before he came home, I had the meal completed, the table spread, and couldn't wait for him to come through the door. I was all excited for him to come home from work, and I knew he'd be surprised and happy. Now, I must tell you, my favorite candy is peanut butter cups. And Frank used to try to make it a point every holiday to get me the latest seasonal peanut butter cup shape before I saw them myself. Bunnies at Easter's, Christmas trees at Christmas, and so on. Didn't it figure, though? Just when I thought I was going to surprise him, Frank walked in the door. Behind his back were 3 peanut butter cups. As he threw them on the table in front of me, I said, "Dang it, Frank, you did it again." And neither of us won the competition. But then again, it seemed as if they'd both won. Marianne and Frank were a super couple. And thank you, Marianne, for the title of this book, as it seems so appropriate for couples such as yours. Couples that seem stronger, more loving, more passionate, more, well, super in their love for one another. Marianne and Frank's superness, like that of all super couples interviewed, will help to beget a culture of super couples, because I learned that super couples are not accidental. They are made and are very intentional. This, my readers and viewers, is the music to your ears you've likely been hoping and searching for. The same music I had been hoping to hear. As I began my research, I set out to discover one of 2 things. Did these super couples have something special that most others didn't have? I mean, did they happen to find their so-called soulmates? Did they simply just get lucky and sucks to be you for all the rest of us who were stuck in mediocre marriages, or worse yet, marriages like mine that were troubled? 25 years into my own marriage, and I needed to know. I just had to know. Please, dear God, if there is a formula, please help me to discover it. I must say, though, that though I had hoped to find that there was a formula, I expected to find the former. They just got lucky. No, here's an optimist for you. But I was wrong. I was very wrong. It is not who couples are, but rather what couples do, what they say and how they interact that makes them super. And therein lies the purpose of this book. To teach you how to become a super couple. To present to you the formula, if you will, so that you too can import these strategies into your marriage and check the extremely happy box, or even the perfect box, as so many couples, so many of my super couples do. If you've already discounted this possibility in your mind for your own marriage ever becoming super because you are currently checking the extremely unhappy box, don't you dare close this book. For it's written even more passionately for you than for those who have never struggled. Remember, this book is written by someone who once hated and now is extremely happy with her spouse. That's right, I haven't told you the good part yet, but I will. Dan and I followed the formula, and extreme happiness followed. Rest assured, I know the depth of your pain. But there's one last thing I wanted to share with you before I share that formula. When I was a young bride, I remember having a conversation with an older woman, one who'd been married for well over a decade or 2. I can't remember specifically what the conversation was about, but it must have been about some aspect of relationships or marriage, because what she said to me cut me like a knife and has stuck with me all these decades later. She basically told me to grow up and get over myself if I expected the butterflies to last forever, that it was simply a ridiculous and childish notion. I'd always been taught to respect my elders, and so normally in any other context, I likely would have listened, let the new knowledge she shared with me deflate me, and simply pick myself up and move on. Call me crazy, an idealist, naive, or whatever. Something about that comment was very unsettling, and with all due respect to her age and wisdom, I didn't buy it. I just couldn't. I mean, how could I ever not feel for my husband the wonderful things that I felt about him at that very moment? How could it possibly go away? Maybe for you, lady, but Dan and I are different. He's awesome, and you must have married the wrong guy. Anyway, we know how that story almost ended. I can confidently say that that well-meaning woman 30 years ago was wrong, and I have research to prove it. The butterflies do come back. I know this because 100% of those interviewed have informed me that they do, both husbands and wives, and that those more mature butterflies are even better than they were when their love was young and immature. Their hearts still melt, they still get goosebumps, and their sex lives, though different, are much more passionate and rewarding than they ever were on their wedding days. So believe me, or disagree if you choose. What this book does is analyze the ethnographic research garnered through interviewing more than 50 super couples and converts their words and stories into the super couple formula so that you too may one day attain what on your wedding day you believed to be possible. Happily ever after. I look forward to having you hear the rest of the super couple. Get your copy at breakfastwithbacon.com. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for listening to this Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.